Hey guys, it's Libby, and today it's back, my series with the very unwieldy name which has not yet been fully solidified, rating book cover costumes for historical accuracy. And today's target was requested by Tortoise Dreams, and it is Philippa Gregory. She actually asked for both Philippa Gregory and Alison Weir, who are both authors of Tudor fiction. And I thought I should combine them and have a big Tudor fest, but there is actually just so much to say that I've decided to split them up. So today we'll be going through Philippa Gregory's Plantagenet and Tudor novels. She has written several other novels, but they are not nearly as famous, so I decided not to address them. And I will be talking about all of the ones for which I could get a good image on Google Images, because her website does not have great high-res photos of her covers, which is a shame. And I also will not be doing any covers that are based on the TV or movie adaptations of her works, because I'm not rating movie costumes. I'm rating the industry that creates book covers. I'm not totally sure what this industry looks like, but I do have many things to say about it nonetheless. So since we are dealing with real historical figures in this episode, in addition to showing you the book cover, I will also show you a portrait of said lady if we have one. If we don't have one, then I will show you a picture of someone else from a relevant time. Also, usual caveat that I am aware that authors have very little control over the covers of their books, and so it is not Philippa Gregory's fault if her book covers are awful. However, Philippa Gregory also really doesn't care about historical accuracy. And I feel like maybe she is successful enough that she gets some amount of input, not sure. So, I am not throwing shade at Philippa Gregory throughout this video. I'm just throwing shade at her right now. Also, please enjoy the glare as it migrates across my body as the sun sets. So we're going to go in what I guess we should term in-universe chronological order, starting with Jacquetta of Luxembourg, who is the mother of Elizabeth Woodville, who was the mother of Edward V, and her novel starts in 1430. But I have never read a Philippa Gregory novel, so I don't know how much of her life each novel covers. So I'm going to kind of try to guess what time period the covered costumer was going for, and if it's a little bit later than the year listed as the book's setting, then I'm not going to deduct points for that, as long as it is, of course, during the protagonist's lifespan. So Jacquetta of Luxembourg in 1430. Her novel is called The Lady of the Rivers. In this case, the audiobook cover had the clearest image of the dress, so here's the audiobook cover, and here, since we don't have any portraits of Jacquetta, is a portrait of another woman who is actually Dutch. We don't have a lot of portraits of women in high fashion from the 1430s, so we're going to have to go across the, not channel, across the North Sea. So this outfit is really screaming to me like generic medieval-esque fantasy. This really bright color, which would be really difficult to dye, especially since she's not a queen, she's just an aristocrat. I don't love. Also, her hair is down. Women's hair in the 15th century was not only up, but certainly the first half of the 15th century always veiled. So lots of minus points for that. I don't actually know that much about 15th century jewelry, so I don't have a lot to say about the necklace. Oh, the reason I don't know that much about 15th century jewelry is because you don't see people wearing that much jewelry before the 16th century, or you get in the late 15th century, people start wearing a lot of jewelry. But I think this would look better without the necklace. The trim on her neckline and on her sleeves, they did not use trim like that on a dress like this. And it's this weird fringe thing. What is happening? Also, moving on, her dress has princess seams, which go down over the boob. And they don't get invented until, well, they sort of develop out of the dart, which starts to be used in the 19th century, which was quite a bit after this book is set. In this time period, the kirtle, which is what this garment is called, if you were being unfashionable, would be laced down the front, and if you were being fashionable, would lace down both sides. Now this is, if you made all of those adjustments I just mentioned, this is kind of almost acceptable as an undergarment for the 1430s and 40s, but you need to have a dress, probably for her class, a houppelande on top of it. And the thing about the houppelande is it is not sexy, and it is hard to sell a book with someone in a houppelande and a veil with the pointy bits on the front. So I understand why they made these changes. However, it's still wrong. So, I give this a D. Next we have Red Queen, which is set in 1453 and is about Margaret Beaufort, the mother of Henry VII. So I do want to give the cover designer points for mimicking a style that Margaret Beaufort wore later in her life, which is admittedly really unattractive. So here's the portrait of her with her crimped wimple, and she is here wearing this very pointy hood, but the black fabric development is a little bit later than the date of this portrait. So it should still be white, just a piece of linen that's been crimped. Of course, they only copied the headwear from the portrait, not the outfit, which means that the headwear and the outfit don't really match. This robe thing that she's got going on doesn't really speak to me of any historical era, except perhaps the aesthetic movement in the 1880s when they were attempting to dress historically. I would believe some Victorian lady would love to own this robe and feel so very medieval in it, but medieval women didn't really wear this sort of garment. I do acknowledge the nod to the Burgundian style with this sort of V-neck going over a kirtle, but the sleeves are way more complicated than a Burgundian would have been, and it's really confused about how fitted it wants to be. A Burgundian should be more fitted, a houppelande should be less fitted. This shape around the waist wasn't happening, the blousing, which is what I think is going on here. So this gets, the fabric is acceptable. Yeah, so this gets a C+. This one's hard to grade. This one isn't, though. Next we have White Princess, which is about Elizabeth of York, who was the wife of Henry VII and mother of Henry VIII. This one is bad. So first, obviously, hair should be covered. Then she's wearing like really dark eyeshadow. I did see a little hint of makeup in the two previous ones, but I didn't comment on it because I know that you do need to wear makeup for a photo shoot because they're going to be shining bright lights on you. But here, like, the eyeshadow is meant to look like it's there, so no, Libby disapproves. Then you've got her partlet, which is this little thing filling the neckline underneath her dress. They did wear partlets, but in this period they were solid white. We're set in 1485 is what it says. Yeah, in this period, late 15th, early 16th century, they were either solid white or solid black, not like off-white and net-y. And they also didn't have a collar that opened. They were just straight. That is a later style of partlets. Her cloak, like, is this super cheap poly velvet with, like, a sequined trim. Oh god, let's not talk about it. Her dress, like, at some point, this dress was okay. The shape is good within the neckline for like the 1530s. It's got a nice structure to it, but then at some point, I don't know if it was for this photo shoot, I don't know if it was for some earlier incarnation of the costume, someone stuck this trim on the front with like a fake crisscross lacing which, like, for one thing, no one's gonna put on fake lacing on their outfit. You try to make lacing as discreet as possible at this point in history. And also, they did not use crisscross lacing until the invention of the steel grommet in the 1820s. So before that, all lacing was spiral lacing. You take the cord and it goes in one side and then around, and you only have one cord. You don't have two crisscrossing each other, which means the eyelets, instead of matching up, are offset. This is probably the most significant thing I want people to take away from this video. Crisscross lacing, not invented until the 1820s. Oh, and the reason it was invented with the advent of the grommet was it meant you could pull corsets a lot tighter. And this is when tight lacing started to be a thing. You can't really tight lace with a spiral bound pair of stays or pair of bodies. Okay, moving down, this belt would be good for a century ago, but not really anymore, and you can tell it just looks awkward. She has a waistline where the bodice ends and the skirt begins, and then the skirt sort of wants to poof, but then it gets held in again by the belt. That's not so great. Yeah, this is bad. Is there anything redeeming enough about it for me to not give it an F? Oh, I just saw the princess seams on this bodice too. Okay, fail. Next we have The Constant Princess, which is set in 1491 and is about Catherine of Aragon. I have two different covers for this one. The first one bears absolutely no relevance to anything anyone was wearing at this time period, from the color to the cut to the bodice and skirt not matching each other or the sleeves, to the hat, bonnet thing. All of it's bad. Fail. The next cover definitely has higher glance value, and if you compare this cover to the portrait of Elizabeth of York that we saw earlier, you can see that there's like some structural similarities. I think that portrait of Elizabeth was painted around the time that this book is taking place. Let's start nitpicking though. So number one, they decided to portray Catherine with black hair. I don't know who decided this, but for some reason everyone thinks Catherine of Aragon had black hair because she was, I don't know, Spanish, or they looked at this older portrait of her and they've like confused the bit sticking out from her hood as her hair, but she was ginger. The thing covering her hair, I think, is supposed to be a French hood, but it's sitting too far forward on her head. It should be further back. It doesn't actually have the hood part, the part that would cover her hair. I'm pretty sure that's just her hair flowing down around her shoulder. Oh, and the French hood was not in fashion yet in England or Spain, so no. Okay, the square shape of the neckline is good. Probably should be filled by a partlet, but you know, we gotta sell books, we gotta have a glimpse of cleavage. And then you can see that this sort of cut, the decor, the trim is similar to the portrait of Elizabeth of York. And these sleeves are a good sort of transitional sleeve from 15th century styles to that iconic Tudor fold back sleeve that we're all used to. It's getting bigger. So this has its pluses and minuses. I'm gonna give it a C-. Then we have her super famous other Boleyn girl, which is set in 1521, and is about Mary Boleyn, sister of Anne Boleyn. Okay, so first thing I see is this V-shaped, I'm gonna call it a stomacher, in the front, which is a no. That sort of thing was being worn like 50 years later at the end of the century, but at this point you're gonna have a matching placket, a placket to match your dress, and it doesn't have a V front. It's like, I don't know, sort of a slightly curved trapezoid that goes across your torso to hide the front closure of your dress. The jewel-encrusted neckline is good. The little frills of shift coming out of it are not. They were not adding ruffles to shifts at this time period. They were probably adding like black work embroidery. They were doing frills in the 18th century, and they were also doing the triangular stomacher in the 18th century, so I'm wondering if this gown began as an 18th century gown and then someone has just slapped some Tudor sleeves on it. The hood, what I can see of it, is actually pretty good. I'm kind of confused by the sleeve action. It looks like it's being folded back, but like it's just quilted something, or even like the underside of the damask. It looks bad. It should be like a fur or velvet. So the headgear is really good. I give this a flat out C. Lots of things in the C range, or a fail today. Okay, and now we are on the very last one. This is The Virgin's Lover, which is about Queen Elizabeth, surprise, surprise, and it is purportedly set in 1558. Now, what really caught my eye with this one is just like, aw, that's adorable. It's precious how they don't understand fashion history. So Elizabeth is wearing a ruff around her neck, which this is what we term a floating ruff, meaning it's not attached to anything. Normally, you have floating ruffs at like the very end of the century and into the 17th century, but at this point, your ruff is attached to a partlet or to your shift. And then the thing that is so adorable, in the most condescending way, is that in addition to her neck ruff, she has another ruff coming out around her neckline. So you would never wear the two of these together because these are both ruffs. This open thing standing out around her neckline is what the ruff developed into in like the 1590s. And you can't tell so much because she's sitting down in this picture, but having this huge thing would actually make her proportions look really weird. This sort of standing ruff is meant to be worn with a French farthingale or a wheel farthingale, which makes your skirts stand straight out. You also are wearing shoulder support so that your shoulders look bigger, and you're creating this really strange artificial silhouette, which the standing ruff kind of looks good with. But with these straight skirts, or even over a cone-shaped Spanish farthingale, the proportions are just going to be weird. She's got this stomacher, which is differently colored than the rest of her gown, which like maybe at the end of her reign, but not in the 1550s or 60s. The sleeves are okay, and the blue fabric is okay. The gold glitzy bits, like it really kind of looks like we glued some sequins on, and it's not good. Oh, I also just noticed the trim on her skirt opening. No trim there, and also not that kind of trim. This one, also a C. So, no even B's in this lot, let alone A's. Let's see if Alison Weir can do any better when I come back to talk about her books.